Hello, today we'll be talking about understanding adversity, and what that is for children and their families, and what that looks like, the effects that adversity has on the students, and how teachers can be supportive of families and students in their classrooms. So, first, we're going to briefly talk about what adversity is. Adversity are difficulties or misfortunes that someone or people experience. We often talk about resilience in the face of adversity, especially regarding to children, how they are very resilient when it comes to facing these difficulties or misfortunate events that they have to face in their lives. So, what adversities or obstacles do children face and their families face? We'll be talking about how families and students are affected by obstacles. Some of them, like poverty, homelessness, and a natural disaster specifically. So, when we're talking about obstacles, how this affects families and children, what Grant and Ray reported within their book is that children who are poor are more likely to have cognitive delays. So, specifically, when looking at those affected by poverty, they tend to have lower math scores, lower reading scores, poorer health, and school absenteeism. This is due to a lot of families, when in poverty, not having insurance, not being able to have medical care, including physician's cares and dental care. Absenteeism, because they are looking for work. They have not prioritizing the student at the moment because they have other stressors that the family is facing at that time, and they're less likely to graduate as well. Those that are in face poverty, as mentioned, those that are in poverty tend to be uninsured. Their immunizations tend to suffer, and they tend to have more illnesses, which also contributes to the chronic teaism for schools or absenteeism in schools. I'm looking specifically at family and children that are affected by homelessness. There is a developmental delay, so children that by the age of 5 tend to have at least one major developmental delay, and the research shows that it's common. Areas that where they're seeing these developmental delays are within the language skills, the hand-eye coordination, and emotional or behavioral development. So we're seeing that children that are facing homelessness tend to have a lot of developmental delays even at the early age of 5. They're seeing it with that, so that affects them when they are able to go to school. So by the age of 5, when they enter kindergarten, they are already delayed with the hand motor skills, having a hard time holding a pencil, understanding their alphabets, keeping up with the classroom and their other peers as well. Due to homelessness, students tend to demonstrate a higher incidence of chronic teaism, as well as lower graduation rates. So it tends to be from the moving, unstable housing, that affects them. When looking at specifically natural disasters and how it affects students and their families, as you can imagine, it's quite devastating. It's a huge disaster. Their homes, their whole family structure, their whole home structure, community structure has been destroyed or demolished. They had to be relocated. They're in disaster shelters. Their schools no longer what they used to think of what it is as schools that is safe and place for learning. It's now a place for them to shelter down, receive some kind of help in a very cramped room with many other families that are going through the same situation. It's very traumatizing for children, and that affects them developmentally and emotionally. Like I said, they lost a lot of their possessions, their pets, injuries to themselves and their relatives or friends. And then, since families are so preoccupied with rebuilding their lives, families tend to miss or not recognize serious changes in children emotionally or mentally in their development. Like I said, children are very much affected with all this change in their physical health, mental health, environmental health, what their family is going through. They're understanding their family stressors, so they're also picking up on that. And their families may not realize how the greater impact this is really affecting children on a deeper level. So, how do these obstacles affect children? So, kind of going back, touching back into what was previously stated, how do these obstacles affect children's behavioral and developmental abilities and their success in education? So, children are facing these high adversity situations tend to be developmentally delayed. They may not have the resources or access to resources that other students had, such as having their parents read to them at night every single day, that language development for them. Their instability in housing or medical care, dental care, a lot of changes in the home. They can also experience violence that affects them. They tend to act out, have a hard time developing good social relationships. In school, they have a hard time being in school. The needs don't seem to be met. It's a lot of requests that are made to the student, so they find it hard to focus. So having all these changes and these instabilities and adversities in children's lives affects their education deeply, because one, they're not only were they not exposed to the language or the socialization that other students were, if they were stable, either in poverty or after a natural disaster. But also we're seeing that it affects them emotionally as well. So how can teachers support in the classroom, and how can they support these families? First and foremost, as always, having their classroom be an open, welcoming, safe place where children feel at home. They feel safe and welcome. They know that it's a place for learning, but they're going to feel supported and have their needs met. The families know that this is a safe place for their children to be, and they feel comfortable with their children being there. They have a great collaborative teamwork and connection with the teacher to understand the family on a deeper level and what their needs are and how they can be assisting. Being an open and safe place for families where they do feel comfortable if they're able to communicate when they're going through adversities, and how they can support the child while they're in the classroom and help them find resources outside as well. As mentioned before, when a natural disaster, now the dynamics of the classroom may change to not being a fun, safe place for learning, but now more of a stable place for the children to stay, and have a stable housing while they get everything situated, while still being fun and open, and being there for the children and their families.